Welcome CSE 121, Programming 1 Online, Fall 2020, and this is Exercise 9, our random number guesser, and from the title you can figure out what we're going to do. We're going to guess random numbers, and the whole idea of using random numbers is going to make our Python programs more interesting. We'll introduce the element of chance as far as what's going to happen in there. So random numbers can do that. They're generated, but we're not generating them. So just like conditional statements introduce different kind of paths, random numbers will also generate results that we can't really follow until they come out. So that's what we're going to do here. And we're going to start with something real simple. We're just going to guess a random number. Just like if someone was standing in front of you and said, I'm thinking of a number, and they have their hands behind their back between 1 to 10. And you're just guessing it. That's all we're going to do is we're just going to guess a number. And we're also going to see how many times it takes to guess that number. So what we're going to introduce here is going to be something called the random module, which is basically a Python file that needs to be imported. It's not part of the regular Python set. When you work with it, you have to import it in, just like the turtle module. It has its own set of methods. The random module has its own set of methods, and it's able to generate a random number. And the nice thing about this one is we could generate an integer between 1 and 10, inclusive of both of these. So we don't have to be multiplying by 10. Sometimes JavaScript makes it a little difficult because they generate a random number that's less than 1, which then you have to do all kinds of math just to get a random number. So this makes it pretty easy. And we're just going to make a variable that represents that random number. So we're going to let the computer generate a random number. And we always have to say random.randint. Randint is the method of that module, of the random module. So we're going to say random.randint, and then we're going to put in the numbers that range. So it's going to generate a random number like 5. And then we're going to run a while loop, and we're just going to say while true. Now remember, while true is basically an infinite loop. It'll just keep running, except we're going to use a break. So as long as you have something that's going to break a loop, you don't have to worry about it being infinite. So we can break it here. So if we guess the number, we're going to break it. If not, we're going to use something called continue, which will keep us in the loop. So that'll keep us in the loop until it ends. So it could go on. If we don't ever guess the number, it'll keep going on. But this will let us start the loop again. Although it is while true, we may not need it actually. So let's see what happens here. Last year when we did this, we put continue in here, and actually continue will let us restart the loop, but we'll try with or without that. But anyway, let's just see how it works here. So we're going to enter a number between 1 and 10. Now I'm going to come up with something like 3, and it says please try again, and I'll try 9. And it says please try again, and I'm going to go with lucky 7. And I'll try 1, and I think I was going to try 5, and it's not that. Try 6, and it's finally 6, and it took me 7 guesses. It counted the guesses, so we used our counter there, and notice the loop kept going on until I got there, until I finally got to the part it would not break until my guess was the same as a random number. So every time I was punching in my guess, it wasn't matching up to the random number. And then at the end, we have just a print statement that has an F string that says you took this many guesses to match the number. And then it tells me what the number was. So it says you took 7 guesses to match the number 6. So very simple kind of exercise here, but it is going to review while loop. It's going to review counters. It's going to review conditionals. It's going to review break. It's going to introduce continue, which we may or may not need. I have to double check. I may not even need continue there because the while loop should just continue without that if we come here. If we print it out, it should just go back to the beginning, and we'll use this random module here. So we'll try it out. So what you're going to do is go to your dashboard. This is my dashboard, and let me go to consoles and make sure I have all my consoles closed. And I'll go to files, and I'll go to my CSE 121, and I'll make a new file, and I'll call it 9 dash, and I'll just call it random number guesser. .py. Make sure you always have the py. So this is a long name here, random number guesser. And unless you just want to call it RNB or RNG or something like that, but I'll just call it that for now. And I'll make a new file. And the first thing we're going to want to do here is import the random module because we can't do it unless we import it. So we're going to type import, and we're just going to say random. It's actually importing random.py, but we don't put the py. We're just going to say import random, and it'll know it's there. So we're going to start off with that, just like we import turtles. And then we're going to generate the random number. And I'll just call it Rn. How about that? Rn will be the random number. And it'll equal, and we're going to run a method. Now, if you're not familiar about random, if you go to the W3 schools, that's always a quick place to go to just review something. And you go to Python, and you go to numbers. Now this is all kinds of stuff about numbers, but if you scroll down, you'll see something about random number. And this one says random.randrange. And it's saying it's 1 to 10, but it doesn't include 10. It only goes up to 9. And we're going to use randint. So I'm going to go to my random module reference here, and it'll have all of the methods from the random module. See here it says methods. Anything that has like the module name dot, that's typically a method. And here's different methods here. There's all different ones. We're not going to use a whole bunch here. And this is the random one. You can see it produces a number between 0 and 1, a float number. That's what JavaScript does when you try to generate a random number. Then you have to multiply it by 10 to get a real integer. They have randint in here, and it looks the same. It looks like it's doing the same thing. And if you click on randint, it actually has a little thing. It says this method is an alias, meaning a shortcut for randrange. So it's actually taking randrange and it's giving the full range. So we're just going to use randint because it includes the first and second number that you show there. So we're just going to use randint, but just keep in mind there is something randrange where it doesn't include the last number. It goes up to the last number, but we're going to use randint. So let's go back and do that. So you could read more about that if you want, but I'm going to do random. I have to put random here, and then I'll do the randint, and everything's lowercase. And then I have to put my arguments in here, and again, we're going to do 1 and 10. So I'll do 1 comma 10. You don't need a space in there. I'll close my parentheses. So I'm going to generate a variable that's going to hold that in here. And if you just want to see what it is, if you just want to try it out first, you can just print out rn and just try it out and save what you have here and just run it. And there it is, 9. That was fun. Let's try it again. 6, 9. Wow. If 9 was your lucky number, you'd already have it twice. Look at that. 8. It's doing real high numbers here. 2. Now it went down. So anyway, that's what it's doing. So it's generating random numbers here. So we're also going to count how many times they print out, and we're going to guess a number and see if it matches up with this. So we're not going to know what it is until the end. So I guess I'll just move this print statement down for now. But after we generate a random number, then we're going to make a conditional statement. But first, let's just make a counter. So I'm just going to say count equals 0, because we'll start at 0 with a count, and then we'll count up and see how many times it takes us to guess the random number, because we're just going to increment our count every time we guess. So we're going to make a guess, and we're going to put it in a while loop, because we're just going to make it infinite. So we're going to say while true, because true is always true. True will not be true. We're only going to just break this loop if something happens. So while true, that's where we're going to keep asking the question. So we're going to put our input in here. So we're going to say while true, I guess we could call this guess, or we'll say guess. This is going to be our guess is going to be equal, and we're going to put our input in here, input, and we'll just put enter a number from 1 to 10. And this is going to guess, or we could say guess a number. And again, I'll put a colon here, and I'll put a space, and I'll close that off. And I have to close off my quote here. So that's our string. Now, do we need to convert this to an integer? Well, I don't know. This is a randint function. Let's just wait and see. Would probably, because it's using rand integers in here, and we're just going to match them up. For not doing math with them, we may not. So let's just wait and see. So we're going to guess it, and guess a number from 1 to 10. You're going to pick like 1 or something. And then what it's going to do is use a conditional statement to see if you're right or wrong. So we'll say if guess is equal to, meaning equivalent, so we're going to use that comparison operator and say equals equals. If guess is equal to rn, which is the number that the computer comes up with, if that's the case, if they're the same thing, then we're going to break our loop. Well, actually, we don't want to break it yet. We actually, if there's anything to print out, we actually want to do that, unless the print is outside the loop. Keep in mind, if we're printing outside the loop, if we break the loop, it's just going to go down to the print statement. So we could just break it here. We could just say, okay, break and end it, and that means we got it right. And then if not, which is our else in this case, only 2 options. Either we got it right or we didn't. So that's all we need for if and else. What's going to happen here, it's going to basically continue the loop again. And we can also just print out a message that says print try again. Now it'll still do the guess thing, but we're just putting something extra here. You didn't actually have to do this, but we'll put print try again. There's a couple ways we could do this, because you might think, well, what if we didn't put try again? What if we just had guessed a number? Do we even need an else? Could we just say if and just have it break, and then if not, it just will keep looping? Possibly. We'll try that, but we'll do this here. And then there's also a continue statement, which means it'll start the loop over again. Now, we may not need this. And actually, let's leave this out right now. Let's see if we don't need it. And then we'll put it in if we need it, but we may not even need it. But continue is another statement that's part of loops that continues the loop again. Now right here, if it goes here, if it's in a loop anyway, it should go back up anyway. So it should keep looping anyway, because true is never going to be not true unless we tell it something. So we may not even need continue there. In my old version, I had continue there, but we may not need that. We may not even need an else, but let's just try it out. So it's going to say try again, and then we can put a new line maybe in here, so that after it produces the guess again, there's a little space. So we could put it in here. We could have put it here, but I'm going to put it here so that after we try again, there's a little space and then it says guess the number. So we'll try that out. And then what we're going to do down here, instead of just print rn, we're going to put a print statement and we'll do an f string. So I'll put quotes, and then outside the quote, I'll put an f, and we have our quotes. And I think we said something like, you took something guesses. Now, I'm not even sure what we're going to put in there yet. I guess count. We're going to put count in there because we're going to count up the number of guesses. You took count guesses to match, and then the random number, which is rn. And then I'll put a period. So we have an f string here. There's our quote. You took blank guesses to match the number. So I think that's right. We have rn. We don't need guess here because the guess is going to be the same thing as the random number once we guess it. So that's what's going to happen at the end. And we have the print statement outside the loop. So after the loop is done, then it'll print this out. It'll count up how many. Now, we didn't do the count up yet. Now, here's our count. And where do we put the count? We should put the count right after you guess, because if you're counting guesses, don't worry about the conditional statement yet. Put it right here. Go right here and just say count. And we could use that shortcut, and we can use plus equals. If you did equals plus, that would just be the positive number 1. And you don't want to reassign it to 1. You want to say plus equals. So it's actually incrementing 1 to itself. So we're going to do it like that. And you don't need the spaces by it, but I'm going to put that in there. So we're counting up that every time you guess. So even if you had one guess and you got it right, it'll say you had one guess. Here's the problem. If we say it took 1 guesses, we could change that. Now, we'll fix that. That's something where, when you're troubleshooting, you could say, well, that looks bad. It took me 1 guess and it says guesses. And you think, well, I could put parentheses there. Or you can make a variable that says, okay, if your number is 1, then you're going to use guess. And if it's not, then you're going to use guesses. That's not hard to do, and that actually makes it look better. So you could do that. So we could probably do that to here to make it look a little bit better. But let's see how this works so far. Let's just see what we have so far. There's nothing wrong with just saving it and trying it out. And then if you get an error, if we forgot something, that's fine. So I'm not even thinking much past this. We're just guessing a random number here, and let's just see what happens. Number from 1 to 10. I'm going to try 2. It says try again. There's the space there. So now we're going to guess again, and I'm going to try 5. It says try again, and I'm going to try 9. And you could just go through and try 1 to 10. I'm doing random ones here. I'll try 6. It wasn't 6. Did I try 7? It wasn't 7. Did I try 8? It wasn't 8. I tried 9. Let's try 10. It wasn't 10. I think I got them. I don't think I did 1 yet. Let's see if it's 1. I'll try 3. And it's not 3. So now you got to start thinking, hey, do I have a problem here? Let's see what we got here. We got 9, 6, 7, 8. If you're like, wait a minute, something might be wrong here. Now you got to write it down. I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Do I have 2? So there's a problem here. I'm doing them all and it's not guessing. And then, so that's fine. That's a good way to kind of troubleshoot. It's never equaling here, the RN. We're generating that, but it seems like it's not breaking the loop and doing anything. So it's not breaking the loop. So why isn't that equaling that? Well, is it because we need that to be an integer? Because there's an issue with the integer? I don't know. Let's do this first. Right here, I'm going to say print. This is a good way to try it out. I'm just going to say print RN. So right away, it'll print out what the random number is. And there's only one random number because it's generated outside the loop. So it's not like it's generating it each time it loops. It's generating one number, and then we're kind of guessing it here. And we don't have an error. We're not getting any kind of syntax error, so I think we're okay. But let's try this again. Let's see what our issue is. So I'm going to say 1. And it says the random number is 6. Try again. So now I know the number is 6. So I'm going to enter 6 to see what happens. And it says try again. So, all right. So that means I have some kind of issue here, some kind of an error that isn't a syntax error. It's something with the logic that I'm doing. So if guess equals rn. So here's guess. Now the only thing I could think of is that this is a string and this is a random number, and there's a problem there. So let's try that. Let's see if that's an issue. Let's see if we make this int and we make our guess be an int, because our guess right now is a string. So maybe it can't find equality between a integer and a string. Maybe that's it, but that's a good way to find out. So let's save that and we'll do the same thing. This one is cheating for us because it's printing out the number. So I'm going to start here and I'll try 6 again. And it's saying it's 9. So let me put in 9. And it says you took 2 guesses to match 9. Now what did we learn from that? We learned that because this is coming in as a string, you can't match a string with an integer because this is generating an integer. How do we know that? Because it's a random int. So even though you might have the same number, it's not looking at the string of 6 the same as an int of 6. So we have to have int in there. Because we're using randint, we have to do that. And you know what? It's actually good that we found out this way. What a better way to find out than to go through and learn it this way, than to just, me tell you, oh, make sure you do int. Now we kind of figured that out, that it didn't work. So, that's what's nice about kind of jumping in and running your source file and then seeing what happens, because we're discovering some of these things here and they should make sense. If you're like, well, we're guessing the number, we don't have any errors, what's wrong? And the fact that it's an integer, this is an integer and this is not, hey, let's try, maybe that's the problem. And it is. So it won't see equality between two numbers if one's a string and one's an int. So we have to make sure that's an int. Now we know that. So that works okay. And what did we also find out? We don't need to continue here. And actually, let me try this. Let's say you didn't want to have try again. Maybe that's not really necessary. So I'm going to just temporarily cut this. You could do this. You could put a pound sign and a pound sign. And then we just have an if statement. And that's okay to just have an if statement. If it doesn't work, it should just restart the loop anyway. So let's see what happens here. Now we're still going to cheat here. So I'm going to put 3 and the number's 1. So I'll put 1 now. And it says you took 2 guesses to match 1. So that worked. Okay, so we don't even need this. If we're just guessing here, we don't necessarily need the number. So that's another thing we could do. We can even take that out, or I'll just leave it commented out for now, but we don't necessarily even need that to have an else. Unless you want a message that says try again, you don't need an else. So you don't always need an else with an if. As long as you have a way to, it's in a loop, so it's going to keep going back. And until this is right, that's the only thing that'll break it. So if you never guess it, I guess it'll go on forever. But it's not really generating code forever and generating numbers. It's going to slow down your system. It's just, you'll never end. You'll just have to stop it. Okay, so that worked out okay. And let's try it again. This time I'm going to get rid of this. And again, I could just comment this out because you might want to test it. So that's why you might want to keep that there. And I'll just try it one more time. And this time I'll do it for real. I'll do a real guess here and see how I do without cheating. And this time, I'm really going to get it right, so I'm going to choose 7. And it's not right because it's saying guess the number again, so I guess I'm not right. And I'll try 8. And it was 8, 2 guesses, so it took me 2 guesses to match 8. Now, I could have put a line break in there, so it actually does this. So when my message comes across that I won, it actually separates it from all the guesses, so that would work. And this would be a good time to take a break. The video is getting a little long, and we'll pick up in part 2 addressing that little grammar issue with using either guess or guesses if you had one guess and you just want to say one guess instead of one guesses. So we'll continue with part 2 and just do a little bit more with this exercise.